Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. We're really glad you're here to talk about residential building energy code standards. I'm going to try and get into presenter mode here. Hold on one second. Okay, my name is Ann Janda. I work for the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission on energy projects. Today, I am presenting to you on behalf of VAPTA, which is the organization that has all the RPCs and development agencies in Vermont associated with it. So we are going to throw a lot of information at you this morning, but I want you to know that you don't have to take too many notes because I'm going to be sending you the presentation afterwards. This will also be recorded and posted on the Efficiency Vermont website, and the presentation should be posted there as well. So, Residential Building Energy Code, otherwise known as RBES, was enacted in Vermont in 1997. It's the minimum standard for efficient construction for all new residential construction, additions, and most renovations. This has to do with residential buildings, and that means 1 or 2 family dwellings, and also multifamily housing less than 3 stories in height. There are several exemptions from RBES that includes mobile homes, buildings with additions, buildings or additions that are neither heated nor cooled, or are historic. Summer camps, yurts, hunting camps are exempt, as well as buildings who have a low peak BTU and owner-built and occupied homes. So the code is updated every 3 years based on the International Energy Conservation Code. And the latest update went into effect on July 1st, 2024. So all construction commencing on or after that date needs to adhere to that standard. And in the presentation here, I've put the link to the Department of Public Service webpage. You will also see that in the chat if you want to open it up. Pretty much everything you need is at this link. The 2024 RBES handbook is here, as well as the RBES certificate of compliance. So what does RBES require? It requires specific R values, building airtightness, mechanical ventilation, combustion safety, properly sized HVAC, foundation slab insulation, moisture management, efficient lighting, etc. The good news is there are people in this presentation and always that are available to help you understand and implement the Energy Code. Those folks are the Energy Code Assistance Center, that's through Efficiency Vermont. They offer technical assistance on RBES and commercial building energy standards. They can help you understand the requirements, materials, and compliance pathways. There's a phone number here. They will be happy to get your call and answer your questions. So we're going to talk next about the certificate of compliance, which is required by state law. And in most municipalities, it's required in order to receive a certificate of occupancy. This certificate can be completed by the builder or a licensed professional engineer, architect, or home rating organization. The certificate must be submitted to the Department of Public Service and recorded in the land records at the clerk's office of the municipality where the building exists. The cost for that is minimal. It's $15 a page. And my understanding is that's state law. That's what recording costs across the state. So here's what it looks like. It's a 2-page document. My understanding is that there's a PDF on the Public Service Department website. There's also a fillable PDF if that makes it easier for you. So one thing to know is that all projects that have an Act 250 permit are required to meet stretch code. There is base code and stretch code. And some jurisdictions require stretch code. My understanding is that currently that's only South Burlington. But if anybody knows any differently, please let me know. So there are 3 compliance pathways to meet the code. 2 of those pathways are available if you are trying to meet stretch code. So if you are needing to meet stretch code, option 2 would not be available to you. We're going to talk about that in more detail. And now, Steve, I'm going to hand it over to you to explain the different approaches to compliance.
Okay. Thank you, Ann. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So the code allows for 3 different pathways to show compliance with the code. There's the technical compliance of actually building the building and the components and attributes of the building to be compliant with the code. And then there's 3 different options to show how that compliance was made. So they are the prescriptive package plus points approach, the res check modeling approach, and the HERS approach. And so the package plus points, which is what has been known as prescriptive compliance, is probably the most well-known and commonly referred to by the residential construction market. This has always been the avenue in the code that allows the builder to choose a quote-unquote package of attributes of component values to meet to show compliance, basic compliance with the code. For the past 2 code cycles now, there has been a points requirement as well. So a big change from this 2024 code from the 2020 code is that the previous points table had 5 packages to choose from. The package table here now is just a single package, essentially. Log homes have their own standard with the ICC that if you're building a log home needs to be followed. But any other type of construction that falls under the jurisdiction of RBES lands in this other package that is presented here. So this package is applicable to both base code and stretch code. That's another change for this cycle, is that there used to be 2 tables in the code, one for base, one for stretch. They're now combined into a single table, and the points requirements are different for base versus stretch code. So the methodology here is that the builder follows the minimum performance requirements for each of these building components and then earns points based on the size of the building. Another significant shift with this code cycle from previous versions is that the component values for any framed assembly, so we're looking at ceilings, roofs, sloped roofs, above grade walls, framed floors, are all now determined to be met by a U factor of the assembly rather than has been previous practice, which is just an R value of what would be in the cavity of those assemblies. The code is now looking at the performance of the overall assembly of those components of the building. And this is also iterating towards continuous insulation above grade wall assemblies. So the threshold to be met here in this table is the U factor that you see listed. There are R values listed as well. Those are more kind of suggested approaches or examples, as we see here. There's a lot more to dig into on this. So if anybody wants to get into this in more detail, I'm happy to work with you after the meeting. But that is the prescriptive package table. You jump, thank you. So in addition to meeting the minimum performance requirements for each of those components of the building, there are points that need to be earned based on the square footage of conditioned space of the house. And so the more square footage, the more points need to be earned. So you can see here in this table, this applies to additions, multifamily, and to new construction. So if you're building an addition is treated essentially as a new build if it's over 250 square feet. So you have to make that addition comply with the code as it would be for a new construction build, a new house. As I said, the points tables or the prescriptive package table is combined, and the points tables are different for stretch versus base. So you have to earn more points if you have a stretch code situation versus base code. What is not in the slides here, because it's too big to print, basically, is the points table that's in the 2024 code. So these are points that can be earned for making quote unquote improvements to the building envelope, to mechanical systems, to ventilation, material choice for insulation that goes into the building, renewables, etc. So there's a lot of package or points options that are available to be earned depending on the square footage of the house. And we can jump to the next slide, please. So that's prescriptive compliance. You'll find more content and information on the practices of how to put everything together in the RBES handbook. There's a lot of detail in there about kind of putting the systems together here. Alternatively to prescriptive compliance, ResCheck is an energy modeling tool that can be used to show compliance with the code. This is a web-based modeling tool that can be found at the links here. And what ResCheck is doing is showing, based on the inputs from the builder, whomever it is that's modeling the building in ResCheck, it is modeling the building based on the attributes of the thermal envelope to show compliance. So what this tool is actually doing is calculating the U factors of the assemblies of the building. And then it's a weighted assembly value for each component of the building that would show compliance. So this requires the builder, whomever it is that's going to be certifying the home, to go into the tool, model out each portion of the building: walls, floors, foundation, roofs, windows, doors, etc. And then those values that you're putting into the tool for what you intend to build are going to be valued against a quote unquote compliant assembly. And then it will give you a total score for the building. And as long as you come in under that score, the building would be quote unquote compliant with the code. You still have to follow other practices in the code for installation of all these measures. But from the attributes of the building envelope, this is what the ResCheck tool is intended to be used for. We can jump to the next slide. And then this is an example of the output of the ResCheck tool. So after you've modeled each of the building assemblies and you've put the whole building together, built it essentially in the ResCheck tool, this is the report that would be generated and will show whether or not what you've modeled will be compliant with the code, or if there are changes that need to be made to the assemblies. In this example, this building as modeled is not compliant. We're looking at 8.2% worse than the code. So in this situation, you'd have to go back in, look at some of your assemblies and see where they land from what you've modeled as the UA versus what the required UA is for that component of the building, and adjust your approaches and assemblies from there. So this is an approach that's taken more often than I've seen in my work with architects. A lot of architects use the ResCheck tool as they're designing a building. You know, the intent really here in any of this is to be understanding where you're heading with the design of the building before you start building it, to see what your options are for compliance. Then we can jump to the third option. So the third option to show compliance with the code is now working with a third party. So the first two options, both prescriptive and ResCheck, are intended for the builder, contractor, whomever it is certifying the building, to be the user of that, doing that work. The HERS rating approach is you're working with a third party to do verification of performance of the total building. And this includes operational energy of the building. So the HERS rating is approach, and the modeling that is done for a HERS rating is modeling the overall performance of the building envelope, the thermal envelope of the building, but also taking into account operational energy and the efficiency of mechanical equipment, heating and cooling equipment, ventilation, water use, any renewables that are going to be in play on the site with the building. So it accounts for a much broader range of performance in the building to show compliance. Arguably, it's the most flexible pathway in the code to show compliance. So this is a linear scale of 0 to 100 as a comparative to a reference home. So what is being modeled here in the ResCheck or the HERS tool that's going to be used, the energy modeling tool, is going to be a comparative value of what is modeled, what the proposed building design will be compared to the reference home. And the lower the score here, the higher performing the building is. So for 2024, there is a maximum HERS score of 60 for base code and a maximum of 59 for stretch code. There are no points requirements here. This is simply just modeling the building as a whole for how it will perform. In that scoring, up to 5 points can be earned for renewables. So that means, in a net zero situation, you can't build a poorly performing building and put enough solar on it that would generate the load for the building. You can only gain 5 points towards your HERS score with renewables. So you can jump to the next slide. The process here is, if you've worked with Efficiency Vermont in the past in our residential new construction program, our above code program previously that Efficiency Vermont had been doing ratings as a part of that program. We've not been doing that work since 2022. We do have a couple people on the call here right now that are HERS raters and are doing this in Vermont. And the process being that you hire the rater at design stage, and the rater would be doing what would be called a preliminary rating of the design as a design. And then that way you are aware where you're going before you put a hole in the ground. You're going to get an idea about what you're proposed to build will be compliant or not. And then once construction commences, there is a verification process with the rating. So the rater is required to come out and verify the measures installed for the insulation and building envelope before interior finishes are put up. So that's the thermal envelope inspection. So that's verifying as built on site and any improvements that would need to be made before things get closed up. And then upon project completion, a final inspection is done where performance testing is done on the building, blower door testing, ventilation, performance testing, confirmation of everything as installed in the building, and then a final rating completed. We can jump to the next slide. And this is then the output of a HERS rating. This is the rating certificate, and this will give you what your score is. Again, the lower the HERS score, the higher performing, quote unquote, the better the building is. It's a summary of the different components of the building, the final HERS score, and then projected operational costs for the building based on the inputs that are going into the tool. And then finally here, after everything that we've been covering here is the standard process for a builder who is building a home or an addition or anything that falls under the jurisdiction of RBES for a homeowner as a client. There is the owner builder exemption in the code that is very specific in what it allows for, but essentially it's an exemption from meeting the full technical requirements of the code if you are going to be building and then occupying the home that you're building. If you are truly being an owner builder, there is an exemption from meeting the full technical requirements of the code. So that does not mean that you are exempt from disclosing what you built. So there is a requirement that even though you're building this and occupying it on your own, you're not technically required to meet all the components of the code. You still need to file a certificate, as Ann had noted at the beginning, with the town and with the Department of Public Service. So the owner builder disclosure statement looks basically the same as the standard RB certificate. It's just the way that the certificate is signed off on at the bottom is just a verification from the owner builder, that the code has not followed complete compliance with the code. On the second page of the certificate that has all of the attributes of the building, the intention is that the owner builder is still completing that in full, with all of the information they have access to about the build. So pretty much as built being declared in that certificate, in that statement.
Okay.
So that covers those compliance options.
Thank you so much, Steve. I'm gonna forward here to this page before we take questions. So if your building is in Burlington, your best bet is to contact the city of Burlington, and you'll have that information in the presentation here. If you're not in Burlington and you need help with RBES, you can contact the Energy Code Assistance Center, and that information is there. So I am going to stop sharing and we can take any questions. I see there's a question in the chat. Michael, do you want to go ahead and ask your question? I'll go ahead and read it. It says, I'm a builder, but also sit on my local DRB and select board. Do you have the title and chapter of the law stating the compliance form must be filed with the clerk? Yes, we do. I brought it up to our zoning department, but no one seems to follow up. Also, does the homeowner builder exemption exist? I think we just spoke to that. So if you have any follow-up question on that, let us know. But yeah, if you like, I can follow up, Michael, with the statute where it does mention compliance must be filed with in the land records, which your municipal clerk will take care of. Any other questions?
Towns that issue certificates of occupancy for residential construction are required. They cannot issue that CO without a RB certificate received and filed on in the town records as well. So that's another thing that comes into play on the municipal level.
I had a question. So I'm a zoning administrator for the city of Burlington, and I had a question the other day about, because we've been requiring the RBES form for all window replacements because that affects the U factor. But somebody brought up a good point, and they said, well, this doesn't require any points. And I was like, okay, well, even though that it is 0 points, you're still affecting, it still falls on, there's no exemption that it falls under, based on like the handbook that I was looking at, that the windows would still need to be reported on from a U factor standpoint is how I was interpreting it. I don't know if you guys have any comments on that.
I don't know the answer to that.
So this is kind of how we've to manage messaging around this. The code, as you dig into it, the requirements of RBs lands on a variety of different project typologies for residential construction. It's not just new construction, new from the ground up for a new home or an addition, but also in Chapter 5, existing homes, alterations, renovations, and repair are covered as well.
Right.
And there's different kind of requirements that come into play depending on that type of project. So an alteration where you are replacing a component of the building, windows or doors or a heating system, the intent in the code is that alteration be documented with the RB certificate, right? That being said, the RB certificate is written 100% for documenting attributes for new construction. You know, it's not like, it would be better if there was a second or different RB certificate for alterations, right? That was structured a little bit differently. But the way that the certificate can be used in that circumstance is at the top of the certificate, you can identify what the project type is. And then in that scenario, the only attribute that you're looking to verify is that what components you've changed in the building. So in the example of windows, you'd be putting in alteration, a description of what that alteration was, and then in the certificate, just completing what the U value was for the windows that were replaced. You're not required to do anything else with points or prescriptive compliance, et cetera. Similarly, like if there was a furnace or boiler replaced, you know, technically you would be completing the section of the certificate that shows what the design load was and the sizing of the equipment, you know, the mechanical section of the certificate. But we don't, it's not typical that those types of projects get submitted with those types of alterations.
Okay. Hey, Steve, I just, this is Matt. I just put in the chat the U factor alternative or equivalence table. And so if you're just doing a single component, you can look at that table and that's what your component U factor ought to be. You can also use ResCheck for a partial alteration. So you just enter in ResCheck the things that are changing and you get a compliance pass fail. Now that said, ResCheck 2024 is not available yet, so you'd have to do basically some manual calculations using that table I posted in the chat until that's ready.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we have one more question in the chat from Jeff. Whose obligation is it to file the RB certificate once it is completed and provided to the homeowner? My understanding is that it's the builder. Is that your understanding, Steve and Matt?
Yeah, as you noted at the beginning, you know, the builder, engineer, licensed architect, whomever it is that's certifying the home as compliant with the building is the one expected to be filing certificate with the homeowner, with the town, with the state. You know, they're providing the certificate. I think it's more of an open-ended thing about whom actually is going to the town office and paying the filing fee. You know, I think that varies, either the homeowner or the builder. So there's not a hard, fast rule as to who is bringing the actual documents to the town office or sending to the DPS, just so long as they're filed.
All right. So unless there's any other questions, I think that brings us to the end of our presentation. I am going to put a survey in the chat, which I'm hoping that you will fill out. This presentation was grant funded, and our grantor would really like to get some feedback on how you liked this presentation or have ideas to make it better for future presentations. We're going to be presenting to several different audiences on this topic. And like I said, I'll be following up, sending you the presentation. We'll be posting this recording. And I'll also be sending a brief survey to find out if you would like any additional assistance on any of your current projects. So thanks again for attending, and thanks to all of our experts for assisting with this presentation, and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.